for Harry and Meghan as they continue to build their lives overseas?
For the time being, it's impossible for me to take my family back to the UK safely.
The answer has arrived, not in a press release, not in a formal palace statement, not through a spokesperson standing at a podium reading carefully worded sentences to a room full of journalists. The answer came the way the palace always delivers its most important communications: silently, deliberately, and with a precision that leaves absolutely no room for misinterpretation. King Charles has spoken, and what he said, without saying a single word publicly, has sent shockwaves straight through the Sussex operation. Harry wanted a summer at Sandringham. He wanted his children to see their grandfather. He wanted the world to watch and think. A family healing, a son reaching out, a king with open arms. He even dangled the grandchildren like a bargaining chip. Bring me the security arrangements and maybe, just maybe, you can see Archie and Lilibet. But the palace saw it for exactly what it was. And the response? A door, shut so firmly you could almost hear the echo across the Atlantic. Stay with me, because what is happening behind closed doors right now is more explosive, more calculated, and more consequential than any headline has dared to tell you. And by the end of this video, you will understand not just what the palace decided, but why, and what it means for Harry and Meghan's future. The move Harry made, and why it backfired. Let's rewind and understand exactly what Harry was attempting here, because this was not a spontaneous, emotional gesture from a son who simply misses his father. This was a strategic play, carefully packaged, press-briefed, and publicly positioned to generate maximum sympathy and minimum resistance. Harry floated the idea of returning to the United Kingdom for the summer. He talked about Sandringham, that sprawling royal estate in Norfolk, where the royal family has gathered for generations. He spoke about wanting to see King Charles. And crucially, and this is the part that turned heads inside palace walls, he made it conditional. He suggested that if the security arrangements could be worked out, he would bring the children, Archie and Lilibet, the grandchildren King Charles has barely seen. Think about what that framing does. It positions Harry as the reasonable one, the one extending the olive branch, the one saying, "I'll come, Papa. I just need to know we're safe." And it positions Charles as the obstacle, the king standing between a grandfather and his grandchildren, between a father and his son, between a family and its healing. It was, by any measure, a masterclass in public narrative management, or at least, it was designed to be. But here is the question you need to ask yourself right now. If Harry genuinely wanted to reconcile with his father, privately, sincerely from the heart, why was the first move a press briefing? Why did the story land in the Sunday papers before it landed in a private letter or a phone call to Buckingham Palace? Why did the public know about Harry's desire for a Sandringham summer before the palace's own staff did? Because this was never simply about reconciliation. It was about leverage, and the palace knew it. The palace's answer, delivered in silence. Here is something you need to understand about how the British monarchy communicates. The palace does not respond to press stories. It does not hold emergency briefings to refute claims. It does not tweet, post, or live stream its feelings. That is not how this institution operates, and that is not an accident. The monarchy has survived for centuries, outlasting empires, revolutions, 2 world wars, and the collapse of virtually every comparable royal institution across Europe, precisely because it operates on a single inviolable principle: never complain, never explain. So when the palace wants to communicate something, when it wants to send a message that is clear, firm, and unmistakable.
Now, that post comes after backlash over the palace's announcement King Charles would not put out.
It does so through the carefully calibrated words of people who are close to the institution. People who brief journalists on background. People whose words appear in newspapers without a name attached, but with enough specificity that anyone paying attention understands exactly where they came from. And the message those voices delivered in response to Harry's Sandringham play was this: no, not maybe, not we're considering it, not we'd love to see the children, let's talk. The answer was no. Firm, clear, and delivered with the kind of institutional finality that makes it plain this was not a snap decision. This was a conclusion drawn from years of documented experience. And here is what makes that no so devastating for the Sussex camp. It came with an explanation. not a public one. The palace would never do that, but the explanation is there for anyone willing to look carefully. It comes down to three things: control, privacy, and trust. Of these three, trust is the one that matters most, and trust is the one that is most completely gone. The trust deficit, and why it cannot be wished away. Let me be precise about this, because the word trust gets thrown around a lot in stories like this, and it can start to feel vague and emotional. The palace's lack of trust in Harry and Meghan is not vague. It is not emotional. It is operational. What that means is this: the palace has no confidence, none, that anything shared or experienced in a private family context will remain private. This is not a feeling. It is a conclusion, and it is a conclusion supported by a documented, sequential, publicly available pattern of behavior. Let's walk through the record. In March 2021, Harry and Meghan sat down with Oprah Winfrey and shared details of private family conversations, including a discussion about the skin color of their unborn child,
concerns and conversations about how dark his skin might be when he's born.
that they described as a private family discussion. Tens of millions of people watched it in real time. In December 2022, Netflix released a 6-part documentary series.
We began our relationship with Netflix 5 years ago, purely as a production company.
The most intimate conversations about family dynamics, about tensions between brothers, about what it felt like to be inside the institution. All of it aired on one of the world's most watched streaming platforms. In January 2023, and this is recent, people, this is not ancient history, Harry published a memoir, Spare, published simultaneously across multiple countries, debated in every media market on Earth. The book contained specific details about private phone calls, specific exchanges between Harry and his brother William, specific moments between Harry and his father that were never meant to leave the room in which they occurred.
My father and my brother, they are trapped. They don't get to leave, and I have huge compassion for that.
Nothing that has been shared privately between Harry and the royal family has stayed private. Not a single conversation, not a single moment, not a single emotional exchange. So here is the question the palace is asking, and it is the only responsible question for people charged with protecting an institution. If Harry and Meghan spend time at Sandringham this summer, what happens next? The answer, based on the pattern, is not difficult to predict. There will be material. There will be a story. The summer at Sandringham will eventually surface. In an interview, in a memoir, in a documentary, in a briefing to a sympathetic journalist. The specific details, what was said around the dinner table, what King Charles looked like, how the children reacted, what moments of tenderness or tension occurred. All of it will become available to be shaped and deployed in ways that serve the Sussex brand. This is not speculation, it is the pattern, and the palace is not willing to provide the raw material for another iteration of it. The Meghan question, why she is the central issue. Now here is where things get genuinely interesting, because the palace's reluctance is not distributed equally between Harry and Meghan. The concern is disproportionately and specifically about Meghan. And before anyone reaches for the "that's racist" rebuttal, stop. This is not about race. This is about something far more specific, far more documented, and far more consequential. This is about Meghan's relationship to disclosure and media management. Harry is complicated. His relationship with his father is damaged, strained, operating at reduced capacity. But by multiple accounts, Charles retains genuine personal affection for his younger son. Their bond has not been entirely extinguished. There is still something there. A father's love that, however tested, has not completely broken. Harry alone is one proposition. Harry and Meghan together are a categorically different proposition. Here is why. Harry participated in the disclosure operation. He wrote the memoir. He gave the interviews. He appeared in the documentary. His role in everything that has happened is real and significant. But Harry, as those close to the palace have observed, is not the architect of the operation. He is not the strategist. He is not the one who sat down and understood how to take raw private material and construct a narrative from it. A narrative with a beginning, a middle, and a predetermined conclusion. That role belongs to Meghan. Meghan Markle does not simply use the media. She understands it at a level that very few people, even within the media industry, fully appreciate. She knows how narratives are built. She knows how specific details can be assembled into a story that appears to tell itself but is, in fact, carefully engineered. She knows how the emotional arc of a disclosure can be paced, what to reveal first, what to hold back, when to land the most damaging detail for maximum impact. She is the one who has demonstrated the most consistent, most sophisticated, and most effective approach to deploying private family material for commercial and reputational purposes. She is, in the words of people who have observed her professional operation closely, someone who controls the narrative rather than simply participating in it. And the palace is not willing to give her access to new raw material, not at Sandringham, not anywhere. The monarchy's survival formula, and why the Sussexes threaten it. To truly understand why the palace's position is so immovable, you need to understand something about how the British monarchy actually works. Because it is not a celebrity operation, it is not a brand, and it does not run on the same logic that governs the Sussex commercial enterprise. The British monarchy has outlasted virtually every comparable institution in the Western world. The French monarchy, gone. The Russian imperial family, gone. The German, Austrian, Hungarian, and dozens of other royal houses that existed in 1900, all gone. The British one remains, and the reason it remains is cultural. The monarchy has managed through centuries of extraordinary pressure to remain relevant to the people it serves, while remaining sufficiently mysterious to sustain the reverence on which that relevance depends. It is a delicate balance, relevant but not transparent, present but not exposed, human but not entirely knowable. This balance, and this is critical, is not a communication strategy. It is the operational formula on which the institution's survival has depended. It is why the late Queen Elizabeth never gave personal interviews explaining her views. It is why the palace does not respond to press stories in real time. It is why never complain, never explain is not just a catchphrase, but a survival doctrine. The moment you begin explaining, you have submitted the institution to external evaluation. You have opened a door that cannot be closed. What Harry and Meghan did, with the documentary, the memoir, the Oprah interview, was introduce the logic of reality television into the space where the monarchy operates. They made the private public. They turned family into content. They built a commercial operation on the raw material of what happened to them inside the institution. And in doing so, they raised the terrifying possibility, not just for Charles, but for the institution as a whole, that every royal family interaction is a potential Netflix segment, that every dinner table conversation is future podcast content, that every moment of genuine human connection between family members is material waiting to be shaped. Once people believe that, the mystique is gone. What remains is something closer to a celebrity family. Interesting in the way celebrity families are always interesting, which is to say, momentarily, superficially, and ultimately disposable once the next interesting family comes along. This is what the palace is protecting, not Charles's feelings, not William's pride, the principle itself, the principle that there is something private, something real, something genuinely beyond the reach of cameras and content strategy. And it is a principle that cannot coexist with the Sussex operating model. William's role and why his position is non-negotiable. There is one more voice in this conversation that has not received nearly enough attention, and that voice belongs to Prince William. Because while the decision about Sandringham ultimately rests with King Charles, William's position on the matter is not passive. William is preparing to be king. He has been preparing with a seriousness and a deliberateness that the chaos of recent years has not diminished one bit, and his vision for the monarchy he will inherit and the monarchy he will shape as king is specific, clear, and completely incompatible with any arrangement that gives the Sussex operation access to royal family material. William and Catherine have, over the past several years, demonstrated what the alternative looks like. The birthday portraits, the official engagements, the carefully chosen moments of genuine human warmth that read as authentic precisely because they are not constant and not commercial. We see the Wales children occasionally in official or carefully chosen contexts. We have a sense of them as human beings, but not an ongoing documentary of their lives. That is deliberate. That is the model. The contrast with the Sussex approach, which has deployed Archie and Lilibet as content elements when it served the brand's purposes, could not be more stark. And that contrast is something William intends to maintain. William's monarchy will not be a monarchy in which private family moments flow into the public domain. It will be one in which the private is actively defended, because the active defense of the private is precisely what makes the public moments meaningful. Any arrangement that threatens that structure, any return by Harry and Meghan that provides new material for the disclosure operation, is something William will actively work against, not out of vindictiveness, not out of personal animosity, out of institutional vision, out of a clear-eyed understanding of what the monarchy needs to survive the next century.
Revelations. It was the most open and candid interview Prince William has ever done.
And that is another reason why the door remains shut. The trap, and how Harry walked into it. Here is the cruelest irony at the center of this entire situation. The very thing driving Harry to reach out to his family, the financial pressure, the commercial decline, the desperate need for a narrative reset, is the same thing that makes reconciliation impossible. Think about the logic for a moment. The Sussex commercial operation was built on a specific product, the story of their departure from the royal family and its aftermath. The Netflix deals, the Spotify deal, the memoir, all of it was downstream of that core product. The raw material was the family story, the conflict, the emotion, the sense of insider access to one of the world's most secretive institutions. But those deals have ended. The financial situation has become more precarious. The brand is struggling. As ever, Meghan's lifestyle brand has had a difficult road. The sources of income that were supposed to sustain the post-royal operation are not sustaining it at the level required. And the pressure to generate new material, new content, new disclosures, new access is intensifying precisely because the old material is running out. So what is the most valuable new material the Sussex brand could possibly access? The answer is obvious. A return to the family, new conversations, new moments, new emotional beats. Sandringham, King Charles, the grandchildren meeting their grandfather, the son and the father in the same room, navigating something complicated and human and deeply moving. That story, in the right format, deployed through the right channels, could sustain the Sussex operation for another several years. The palace has identified this logic completely, and the answer it has given is the only answer that makes sense given that identification. Number. Harry is trying to use the invitation as a way to break out of the trap, but in doing so, by making the outreach public, by positioning it as a press story, by framing it in terms designed to generate sympathy and pressure, he has confirmed every concern the palace had about what the visit would ultimately become. He has, in trying to escape the trap, walked further into it. What would a yes actually require? Let's be honest with each other for a moment. Is there any path from here to a yes? Is there any set of conditions under which the palace's answer could meaningfully change? Is this door closed permanently or merely closed for now? Yes, there is a path, but it is not a short one, and the conditions required to walk it are not anywhere close to being met. The first condition is a genuine, sustained, and, crucially, verifiable change in the Sussex operation's approach to disclosure. Not a promise, not a statement of intent, not a press release saying, "We will be more private going forward," not a heartfelt interview in which sincerity is performed for the camera. What would be required is a demonstrated behavioral change, visible over time, in which private family interactions are not subsequently converted into public content, not in memoirs, not in documentaries, not in podcasts, not through the coordinated briefings of unnamed sources with obvious proximity to events. This would need to be demonstrated, not asserted. The pattern of behavior that created the current situation is deeply established. It did not emerge from a single incident, but from a series of decisions made over several years that collectively produced an operating model built on disclosure. A single assurance, however sincere it might sound in the moment, would not be sufficient to override a pattern that extensive. Institutions with long memories require long proof. The second condition is the rebuilding of trust through time, specifically through a sustained period of contact, however limited, that produces no leaks, no coordinated briefings, no documentary material, no memoir passages, no social media content that draws on private access. Trust that has been broken in the specific way it has been broken here is not rebuilt through declarations of intent or through the performance of goodwill. It is rebuilt through the sustained, consistent, unambiguous absence of the behavior that broke it. and that absence must be sustained long enough to be genuinely credible, not months, but years. The third condition, less discussed publicly, but perhaps the most significant in practice, is some visible separation between Harry personally and the Sussex content operation. Not a divorce, not a formal or public break of any kind, but some structural or behavioral change that makes clear that Harry's personal connection to his family of origin is not simultaneously functioning as the Sussex brand's pathway back to royal family material, that Harry's visits to his father or to his brother or to any member of the family will not find their way into future content in any form. This last condition is the hardest to imagine being met, precisely because of how the Sussex enterprise is structured. Harry and Meghan function as a unit, publicly, commercially, narratively. Their commercial product is, at its core, the ongoing story of their departure from royal life and the emotional and institutional aftermath of that departure. Separating Harry's personal family connection from that commercial operation in a way that is credible and verifiable, and without requiring a formal separation of Harry from Meghan herself, is an extraordinarily difficult thing to engineer. It would require a kind of compartmentalization that runs counter to the entire logic of their public identity, and there is, at present, no visible sign that anyone on either side is attempting to engineer it. The Invictus inflection point. So where does all of this leave us? And what realistically comes next? The most significant near-term moment on the horizon is the Invictus Games in Birmingham in 2027. Harry will come to Britain for Invictus. That much is certain, or as close to certain as anything in this situation can be.
So I do have a good positive update for Harry and Meghan. I'm going to be honest.
It is the one commitment he carries that genuinely transcends the current impasse. Invictus is a project with enough authentic credibility, enough institutional weight, and enough accumulated public goodwill that Harry's absence from it would not merely be noticed, it would become the dominant story, overwhelming everything else. He will come. The question is, what happens when he does? When Harry comes for Invictus, questions will follow him that no communications strategy can fully suppress. Will there be a private meeting with the King? Will there be any contact with the Prince of Wales? Will the conditions that currently make a Sandringham visit impossible or inadvisable or simply not on offer have shifted meaningfully in the intervening period? Between now and 2027, a great deal will happen. Much of it is already in motion. The court case regarding Harry's security arrangements will reach a verdict, and that verdict, whatever form it takes, will change the practical and psychological landscape of his relationship to Britain. The Sussex commercial operation will continue along its current trajectory, moving toward either some form of stabilization and recalibration or further contraction and the pressures that come with it. And the King's health, a factor that cannot be discussed openly in any official context but that hovers quietly over every serious conversation about this situation, will develop in ways that are, by their nature, uncertain and beyond anyone's ability to plan around. Any of these developments could shift the calculus in ways that are difficult to predict from the outside. The death of a parent has a way of resetting priorities, dissolving institutional calculations, and creating spaces for contact that no amount of careful briefing or managed communications could manufacture. Grief, and the particular clarity it sometimes brings, does not operate on strategic timelines. But here is what will not be resolved by the passage of time alone: the trust question, the disclosure question, the behavioral pattern question. Time does not repair those things by itself. Only changed behavior does. And changed behavior must be demonstrated consistently, over a sustained period, in a way that is visible enough, credible enough, and durable enough to actually shift the palace's underlying risk assessment, not just its public posture, but its genuine institutional judgment about what is and is not safe. That change has not begun. There is no visible evidence of a Sussex operation that is becoming more discreet, less oriented toward disclosure, more willing to leave private moments genuinely private. The brand, as currently constructed, requires the opposite. The content strategy, as currently structured, requires the opposite. The financial architecture of the Sussex enterprise, in its present form, requires the opposite. Until one of those things changes structurally, demonstrably, and in a way that holds over time, the answer from the palace will remain what it is now, not yet, and quite possibly not ever. The human dimension and why it matters. I want to step back from the institutional analysis for a moment, because underneath all of this, beneath the strategic calculations and the commercial pressures and the trust deficits and the narrative management, there are human beings. There is a father who has a life-threatening illness and who has seen his grandchildren a handful of times. There are children, Archie and Lilibet, who do not know their grandfather, who have no relationship with the family they were born into, who are growing up without the extended family connections that most children take for granted. There is a king navigating a serious illness, while also managing a fractured family and the weight of an institution that has survived for 1,000 years, and that he is now responsible for carrying forward. And there is Harry, a man who is, by his own account, isolated, who has lost the family he grew up in, the institution that gave his life structure and meaning, the country he was born in, who is living in California, far from everything that was familiar, with a commercial operation that is struggling and a family relationship that is broken. These are real losses, real grief, real consequences that were perhaps not fully anticipated when the decisions that caused them were made. History suggests that these kinds of ruptures, particularly within royal families, rarely resolve cleanly or quickly. The relationship between Queen Elizabeth and Princess Margaret was defined by enormous complexity and managed distance for decades. The post-divorce dynamic between Charles and Diana was painful and unresolved until her death. But history also suggests that family ruptures can, under the right conditions, be repaired, slowly, imperfectly, in ways that no one predicted at the moment of maximum fracture. Whether this one is repaired will depend on choices that have not yet been made, on changes in behavior that have not yet happened, on a willingness, on Harry's part, to prioritize something over the commercial operation he has built his post-royal life around. The choice Harry faces. The palace, in its silence and in the carefully calibrated words of those who speak on its behalf, has communicated something quite specific to Harry, and it is this: come with the children if you must. Bring Archie and Lilibet. Let the king see his grandchildren, but leave Meghan behind. Or at minimum, accept that Meghan's presence is what closes the door, and that Harry's presence alone might leave it slightly ajar. That is an extraordinarily difficult thing for Harry to hear, and an even more difficult thing for him to act on, because Harry and Meghan are not simply a married couple. They are a joint commercial enterprise. Their financial futures are intertwined. Their public identities are intertwined. The narrative they have built together, the narrative of two people who simply wanted something better and were failed by an institution, requires them to be a unit. The moment Harry begins creating distance from that unit, even small distances, the narrative starts to unravel. And yet the signs are there, small, easy to miss, but tracked carefully by people who follow this closely, that Harry is, in some ways, beginning to create those distances.
Harry and Meghan side by side as senior royals for one of the last times.
The moments where he seems to pull back slightly from the more extreme positions. The briefings that frame him primarily as a son who wants his father rather than as half of a brand making a strategic calculation. The periodic suggestions that something in him is reaching towards something that the Sussex operation, as currently constituted, cannot give him. These are small signs. They exist within a larger structure that has been built together and that both parties depend on. Harry cannot easily separate himself from the Sussex narrative, commercially or personally, without also separating himself from Meghan. And that separation, whatever form it eventually takes, is not something that appears to be imminent. Where things stand, and what comes next. So here is where we are. The invitation has not been extended. The door is not open. The palace has communicated its position through the channels it prefers. Not directly, not officially, but clearly enough for anyone paying attention. The space between Harry's stated desire and the palace's actual willingness, the space where reconciliation might eventually become possible, remains exactly as empty as it has been. And the question that this moment is asking is simple and enormous and unanswered. Is Harry willing to change? Not to say he will change, not to brief a journalist that he wants to change, but to actually, demonstrably, visibly change, to stop providing the raw material, to stop feeding the machine, to step back from the disclosure operation in a way that is real enough and sustained enough that the palace's assessment of the risk begins to shift? Is that change possible within the structure of the life Harry has built? Within the marriage he is in? Within the commercial enterprise he is dependent dependent on? These are the questions, and the palace, in its characteristic silence, is waiting to see what Harry does with them. The answer to those questions has not yet been given, but the question has been asked. The door is currently shut. It is not sealed, and in the gap between shut and sealed, in the space that still exists between a no that is current and a no that is forever, lies whatever comes next. A rupture that will eventually be healed, or a rupture that will become permanent. The next move belongs to Harry. If you found this analysis valuable, if it gave you a clearer picture of what is actually happening beneath the surface of the headlines, drop a comment below. I read every one of them, and the conversation in the comments on these videos is genuinely one of the best parts of doing this work. The question I want to leave you with is this. Do you think Harry will make the changes that would be necessary to get that door reopened? Not the changes he has talked about, or gestured toward, or implied in interviews, but the deep, structural, sustained behavioral changes that the palace would actually need to see before its risk assessment shifts. And the second question, which I think is in many ways the more interesting one, do you think Meghan would allow it? Because any honest analysis of this situation has to reckon with the fact that Harry does not operate alone. The Sussex enterprise is a joint project. Any meaningful change to how it functions would have to be a joint decision. Those are not rhetorical questions. I genuinely do not know the answers, and I am curious what you think, particularly those of you who have been following this story closely and have thoughts that go beyond the surface level. Subscribe if you haven't already, and make sure you hit the bell so you are notified when the next video goes up, because this story is far from over. The Invictus moment is coming. The legal proceedings are moving. The commercial pressures are building. There will be more to say, probably sooner than any of us expect.